Hey guys, today we're slipping off the sun-kissed shoreline of Malibu, California, where the surfboards glisten, the celebrities sip overpriced smoothies, and just offshore, something massive and silent waits in the cold Pacific dark. Imagine the salty breeze on your skin as you stand there, toes in the sand, staring out at those waves that look so harmless until you realize what might be lurking under them. You probably won't survive this if you tried to find out yourself. But hey, now, you won't survive them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love knowing where in the world this voice ends up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into today's journey together. You slide into the story, as if slipping beneath the waves. The Malibu coast stretches wide behind you, gleaming houses clinging to the cliffs like ornaments, paparazzi chasing the latest reality TV scandal. But out here, just beyond the breakers, things feel different. The sun above is warm, but the water below, it turns from teal to cobalt to a heavy, swallowing black. You don't need to see what's beneath to feel it, the weight of something old, patient, maybe even alive. Locals talk about it in hushed voices, though they mostly laugh it off over beers at Neptune's net. Fishermen tell you, between drags on their cigarettes, about nets snagging on something hard and unmovable down there, something that doesn't belong. And then there are the divers, sun-brown and half-mad, swearing they've brushed their hands across smooth stone columns 70 feet below the surface. Columns too symmetrical, too deliberate to be just rocks. Of course, Malibu is no stranger to myths. It's a playground for dreamers, after all, and dreamers see shapes in the clouds and patterns in the waves. But this is different. The first time sonar picked up something strange off this coast was decades ago. Some old Navy map from the Cold War era showing what looked like a plateau, complete with arches and lines that didn't make sense. Historians still argue whether it was an anomaly in the equipment or evidence of an ancient city lost to the sea. And here you are, drifting over it in your mind, letting the idea settle into your bones. Maybe it's just sediment, perfectly stacked by coincidence. Or maybe, just maybe, you're hovering over the remnants of a civilization older than the pyramids, older than the stories we think we know. The currents whisper to you as you imagine the shape of those supposed arches, their spans stretching wider than any freeway bridge, coated in barnacles and secrets. It's not hard to picture some long-forgotten people carving their lives here, building a place that's not just a crazy theory. Scientists agree that thousands of years ago, sea levels were far lower, and entire coastlines we'll never see again are now buried under fathoms of water. But of course, this is Malibu, where even the mysteries come with a splash of Hollywood drama. Fringe researchers talk about alien landing pads or secret military portals. There's one particularly quirky tidbit about a local radio host in the 80s who swore his signals were being bounced off something under the waves. Something metallic and organized. He called it the hum of the deep, and to this day you can find scratchy recordings of his late-night broadcasts on obscure internet archives. You picture it clearly. Him leaning toward the microphone in a dim booth, whispering about the unknown just off the coast, his voice carrying to night owls who stared out their windows at that same strip of dark ocean, wondering if something was staring back. Even skeptics admit the structure, if you can call it that, is oddly shaped. It's about 2 miles off Point Doom, sitting on a flat shelf roughly 2,000 feet down. The roof, as some call it, spans nearly 3 miles, with what look like arching pillars supporting it. The dimensions alone are enough to make geologists scratch their heads and mutter about erosion patterns while avoiding eye contact. And here's where the fun really starts. No one seems eager to investigate it properly. Sure, there have been dives and drone passes, but nothing sustained, nothing thorough. It's as though the ocean itself is guarding the spot, kicking up currents that make filming impossible, or maybe just spooking people enough to keep them from lingering. Meanwhile, the legend grows. Online forums light up with theories every few months, each wilder than the last. Atlantean ruins, a Cold War submarine garage, a natural gas vent misread as an alien hatch. And the locals? They shrug and sip their lattes, used to living in a place where reality often feels like a script. As you hover in this imagined space, we can't help but think about what draws us to mysteries like this. Maybe it's the need to believe that the world still holds secrets, that not everything is mapped, tagged, and filed away in some digital archive. Or maybe it's that primitive fear, the one that kept our ancestors from wandering too far into the forest at night. The fear that something vast and unknowable is just out of sight, waiting. And yet, part of you wants to see it. To slip beneath the surface, flashlight in hand, and glide along those colossal arches, tracing every groove and edge until the shape of the thing reveals itself. Maybe it would just be stone, cold, silent, lifeless. Or maybe you'd find something that would make you wish you'd never looked at all. The Malibu sun is setting now in your mind's eye, searing gold across the water, while the horizon deepens to a bruised purple. Behind you, the world keeps spinning. Traffic jams, dinner reservations, TikTok trends. But out here, just past the break, there's only the sound of the waves and the quiet pulse of something ancient waiting for you to notice. You float a little deeper now, your mind sinking with the currents to the moment it all really started. The day the sonar blinked. It's funny how big discoveries rarely happen with fanfare. No dramatic music, no lightning bolts from the heavens. Just a small, unexpected blip on a screen that someone almost ignored. Picture it. The late 1950s, Cold War paranoia in full swing. The Navy's got sonar arrays scattered across the Pacific, listening for the quiet hum of enemy submarines slipping under the surface. A young technician at a coastal station stares at the monitor, probably sipping bad coffee, when something strange pops up off the Malibu coast. A formation, wide and symmetrical, in a place where nothing should be. At first he assumes it's a glitch. He even logs it as one, probably thinking, great, another excuse for the boss to yell about recalibrations. But then it happens again, and again. Historians still argue whether those early readings were real, or just the product of overworked equipment. But decades later, in the early 2000s, civilian sonar teams mapping the coastline picked up the exact same shapes. Massive arches, clean lines, the sort of geometric consistency that makes geologists squirm. By then, scuba divers and local fishermen had already been telling stories. One diver, a guy named Rick, who ran a small charter out of Point Dume, swore up and down that in the 70s, while chasing a school of yellowtail, he brushed past what felt like carved stone columns, smooth, almost polished. Rick was a known storyteller. This is a man who once claimed he'd fought off a territorial seal with a snorkel, so nobody took him too seriously. Still, the way his voice cracked when he told that story made you think he'd touched something that rattled him. And then there was the odd case of the missing submersible drone in the 90s. A private oceanographic group sent one of their early remote vehicles down to map the shelf. Everything was going fine, until halfway through a slow sweep of the supposed arch zone, the feed went fuzzy. A loud metallic ping, then nothing. When they finally fished the drone out days later, the camera housing was crushed, as if something had closed around it. Of course, the official explanation was equipment failure. But when you see the photos of that twisted metal, you start to wonder. By the time the internet got involved, the Malibu Base Theory had evolved from a quiet curiosity into a full-blown obsession. Grainy sonar maps leaked online, sparking forums to light up like bonfires. Conspiracy boards called it the Dome, a mysterious entryway to either an alien hub, an ancient human outpost, or, because why not, a secret military bunker built during the height of Cold War tensions. There's even a quirky tidbit about a surfer named Miguel, who swears that after a particularly rough wipeout, he floated far past the braid and heard a low humming from beneath him. He described it as like the engine of a cargo ship, but softer, almost musical. Miguel is the kind of guy who believes coconut water can cure anxiety, so maybe you take his story with a grain of salt. Still, it's hard to ignore that look people get when they've heard something they can't explain. Scientists, of course, tried to keep it grounded. A geology team from a university in Southern California examined the sonar data and suggested the pillars were just natural rock formations, the result of underwater landslides and years of erosion. Perfectly reasonable, except when you overlay the patterns, the arches appear almost equidistant, their bases forming a clean, semicircular arc. Nature, as random and chaotic as she is, doesn't often deal in perfect geometry.
No! It's this god. It's perfect. No!
That geometric detail is what keeps people hooked. Because if it isn't natural, then someone or something built it. And if someone built it, that means an advanced civilization existed along this coast long before the Chumash tribes, long before any record of human settlement here. Historians still argue whether such a civilization could have existed, especially with sea levels being hundreds of feet lower thousands of years ago. But there's no denying that vast swaths of now submerged land could have hosted entire communities. Every theory seems to build on the last, like a tower made of half-truths and wishful thinking. There's the ancient Atlantean outpost crowd, convinced the Malibu site was a hub for a sprawling, technologically advanced society that disappeared under the waves after some cataclysm. Then there are the UFO enthusiasts, claiming the arches are docking bays for extraterrestrial craft, hidden in plain sight under the perfect camouflage of the ocean. And, of course, the skeptics who roll their eyes and say, "It's a rock shelf, people, calm down." But even they can't quite explain why the Navy, the Coast Guard, and every major research institution in the area seem reluctant to publicly explore the site in detail. The official line is always budget, or technical difficulties, or simply a lack of scientific interest. But to you, floating here in this imagined space, that silence feels deliberate. It's the same silence that wrapped around those early sonar readings, the same hush that followed every diver who came back pale and quiet from that part of the coast. It doesn't feel like disinterest. It feels like someone, somewhere, doesn't want anyone poking too deeply. And maybe you get why. There's a kind of primal dread in the idea that under our feet, or flippers in this case, there could be something we're not ready to understand. We're comfortable mapping planet a light on. Still, you can't help yourself. You imagine those first grainy sonar images, those clean lines stretching out like the skeleton of a long-buried cathedral. You picture what it would feel like to swing through those arches, the weight of the Pacific pressing down on you while you trace your fingers along edges carved by hands or claws you will never see. A chill runs down your spine, even though you're still safe, dry, and very much on land. But that's the magic of it, isn't it? This idea that just a short drive from the 101 freeway, beneath the same waters where tourists splash and dolphins leap, something massive and ancient sleeps, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to wake it. And as the sonar ping fades into silence in your mind, you realize that this isn't just a curiosity anymore. It's a question. One that digs into you a little deeper each time you think about it. You hover over that shelf again, the dark blue water heavy above your head, and try to picture what it would look like without the years of silt and coral clinging to every surface. Smooth columns rising from the seafloor, their proportions almost mathematical. A roof so broad and flat you could park a fleet of 747s on top of it. Down here, in the quiet hum of the ocean, it's easy to imagine you're floating above a city, one that no one alive today remembers. And that's where the arguments start. Are you looking at ancient stones or something else entirely? The first time high-resolution scans of the site went public, the data spread like wildfire across the internet. Researchers, amateur geologists, and your neighbor with a Wi-Fi connection all squinted at the images and drew their own conclusions. Some pointed to the angles, how certain edges aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. Others zoomed in on what they swore were supporting columns, like the gases of massive submerged temples. One fringe theorist even drew a mock-up of what the site would have looked like before the flood, complete with bustling markets, statues carved from black basalt, and streets that glowed faintly in the dark. Historians still argue whether early coastal civilizations in the Americas had the means, or the motivation, to build something like this. Sure, the Chumash people lived along these shores for thousands of years, but their settlements were modest, built for survival, not grandeur. And if you're thinking about the more famous megalithic builders, like the Olmecs or the Maya, they were thousands of miles away. None of their known trade routes ever reached this far up the Pacific. But every time skeptics bring that up, believers fire back with their trump card: sea levels. Thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, the ocean was hundreds of feet lower. Tents now buried were dry land then, prime real estate for whoever lived here. If you accept that, then it's not so far-fetched to imagine a thriving settlement perched right where Malibu's waves crash today. One of the quirkier tidbits floating around is that some divers claim to have found pottery shards or carved stones near the site. No photos, of course, just stories, always told in hushed tones, always prefaced with, "I know this sounds crazy, but..." You'd be forgiven for rolling your eyes, but then you hear how their voices falter, how their hands tremble just a little, and you wonder if maybe, just maybe, they touched something that shouldn't be there. Theories spiral out from that point, like ripples in the water. Some say the Malibu Shelf is part of a vast global network of ancient sites, all aligned with celestial markers, an underwater cousin to Stonehenge or the pyramids of Giza. Others insist it's evidence of a civilization that predates every known human culture, something erased by time and catastrophe, leaving only these submerged fingerprints behind. And then there's the alien angle, because of course there is. According to some enthusiasts, the so-called arches aren't just natural formations or remnants of a city. They're docking bays, giant hangars for craft that slip in and out of our oceans, hidden from satellites and curious eyes. They point to odd lights spotted over the water, sudden shifts in sonar readings, and the occasional unexplainable electromagnetic interference reported by boaters in the area. You can't scroll through a UFO forum without stumbling over someone calling the Malibu Shelf the LAX for extraterrestrials. To them, these formations are textbook examples of natural erosion, tectonic activity combined with the relentless grind of tides carving out symmetrical patterns in the rock. "Nature loves a pattern," one geologist told a reporter, his voice dripping with condescension. And sure, he's probably right. Nature does produce some mind-boggling symmetry when the conditions are just right. But here's where it gets tricky. Those same scientists will admit, if you corner them, that there's something odd about the alignment of the structures. The spacing of the pillars, the uniform slope of the roof, the curious way the features echo designs seen in human architecture. They'll never call it artificial, but they can't quite explain it away either. It's that in-between space that keeps the debate alive, a tension between what we can prove and what we can't. And you, sitting there with your fan humming in the background, feel yourself caught in that same tension. Because part of you wants to believe it's just a fluke of geology, some beautiful accident sculpted by millions of years. But another part, the restless, curious part, whispers, what if it isn't? You imagine descending through that deep blue, the light fading until only your flashlight cuts the darkness. The beam skims across one of the so-called arches, and there, etched faintly in the stone, are patterns, swirls, spirals, maybe even something that looks suspiciously like writing. Your heart pounds in your chest. It's the kind of discovery that would rewrite history books, topple entire fields of study, and maybe, just maybe, make you wish you'd never come down here in the first place. Because here's the thing about mysteries like this, they don't always want to be solved. I heard the same story about Mr. Bands. We had, but they came to leave. Some divers talk about feeling watched near the shelf, a prickling on the back of the neck, the sense of something moving just beyond the range of their lights. One man swore he heard a low vibration in the water, like the ocean itself was growling at him to leave. He surfaced so fast he got the bends, and he never dove again. The historians still argue whether these stories are just the human mind playing tricks in an alien environment, or genuine encounters with something. But whether you're a skeptic or a believer, there's no denying that the Malibu Shelf has a presence. It draws people in, holds them in its thrall, and leaves them with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the real point. Maybe it doesn't matter whether the site is a collapsed cave, the ruins of an ancient city, or the interstellar version of a bus stop. What matters is that it makes you feel small, in the best possible way. It reminds you that no matter how much we map, measure, and analyze, there are still places in this world that shrug off our curiosity and keep their secrets close. As you float there in your mind, the currents tugging gently at your limbs, you can almost hear the ocean laughing at you. Not unkindly, more like a patient teacher humoring a stubborn student. There are things you're not ready to understand yet, it seems to say. Maybe someday, but not today. You let yourself drift further into the darkness, past the clean lines of those arches, and into the shadowed corners where speculation sharpens into something heavier. The whispers of the Navy, the maps that were never meant to be public, and that nagging feeling that someone's always known more than they're letting on. It starts innocently enough. Old documents, grainy photos scanned from dusty archives. A retired sonar operator talking too much at a bar in Ventura. But the more you dig, the clearer it becomes. Whatever is sitting out there on the Malibu Shelf, the military has been watching it for decades, maybe even longer. One of the earliest pieces of evidence comes from the Cold War, those jittery years when the US Navy wired the Pacific like a paranoid spider, laying down the SOSIS network, sound surveillance system. to listen for Soviet submarines. On the maps that later leaked, there's a curious blank space off the Malibu coast. Not a note, not a warning, just nothing. An intentional omission in an otherwise detailed survey. Historians still argue whether it was an error or deliberate redaction, but the omission itself is like a hole in a photograph. Obvious, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. Then there are the reports of anomalous activity logged by naval patrols in the area. Strange sonar echoes, readings that don't make sense, objects moving at impossible speeds. You picture the men in the control rooms, leaning over their consoles, staring at blips that dart and vanish like ghosts. When they called it in, the brass would mutter something about equipment malfunctions and tell them to keep quiet. By the late 60s, whispers about underwater tunnels started circulating. Some believed these tunnels connected the Malibu structure to other coastal sites. San Diego, Catalina Island, even farther north toward Monterey. One retired engineer who'd worked on classified projects during that time claimed he'd seen blueprints for submarine transit routes carved through the shelf. He never produced the documents, but the conviction in his voice when he spoke was enough to chill you. And then there's the footage. You've probably seen snippets online. A blurry video of a Navy mini-sub breaching near Point Doom in the early 80s, surfacing just long enough to offload a crew before vanishing again. Officially, the Navy said it was a training exercise. Unofficially, the locals who watched from their balconies that morning still swear they saw something massive lurking under the surface, something that didn't look like any submarine they'd ever seen. The deeper you go, the more patterns you start to see. The way helicopters occasionally hover over that same stretch of ocean, sometimes for hours, sometimes in the dead of night. The reports of unmarked ships anchoring offshore, bristling with antennae and equipment that hums audibly, even from a distance. And always, always, the same response when anyone asks: silence. A quirky tidbit pops into your head. A story about a Malibu surf shop owner in the 90s who claimed two men in suits came in one afternoon, bought every single nautical map he had, and left without a word. He told the story for years, laughing at himself, until one night he stopped. Wouldn't talk about it again, wouldn't even joke. Maybe it's all coincidence. Maybe it's just the military doing what the military does, keeping secrets because they can, because secrecy is their default language. But there's something about the way that patch of ocean hums with quiet tension that makes you doubt the easy explanations. Historians still argue whether the military has ever conducted an official study of the Malibu shelf. No documents have surfaced, no declassified reports, nothing you can point to and say, there, proof. And yet, every time someone gets too close, an independent researcher, a documentary crew, a drone enthusiast, the same thing happens. Equipment fails, access is denied, funding dries up. It's like trying to chase a shadow, always a step ahead of you, always just out of reach. You imagine what those shadow files might contain. High-definition images of the arches, maybe even footage from drones that got close enough to see what's under that massive roof. Rows of servers storing decades of sonar data, each ping telling a story we'll probably never hear. Somewhere in a windowless room, a handful of people might know exactly what sits off the Malibu coast, and for reasons you can only guess at, they've decided we don't need to know. It makes you wonder why. What's so dangerous or valuable about the truth? Is it because it would upend everything we think we know about our own history? Or because it's not about us at all, and whatever's out there isn't something we're equipped to deal with? your mind drifts back to those theories about underwater tunnels. Imagine it, a network stretching for miles beneath the ocean floor, some natural, some reinforced, leading to chambers carved from stone or steel. Maybe they're abandoned now, relics of some forgotten experiment. Or maybe they're not abandoned at all. Maybe that low hum divers swear they've heard is machinery, still running, still doing something. And here's the thing, no one ever seems to stay curious for long. Researchers vanish from the conversation, projects go dark, websites disappear. It's almost funny in a grim sort of way, like a bad spy movie. You start to joke to yourself that if you dig too deep, you'll get the same polite knock on your door. But beneath the jokes, there's an unease that clings to you, because you know deep down that the ocean doesn't care about our secrets. Whatever waits out there, under those 2,000 feet of pressure and silence, has been there for longer than we've been walking upright. The Navy can map it, the scientists can theorize about it, the conspiracy theorists can write blog posts about it until their keyboards wear thin. But the truth belongs to the deep, and it isn't giving it up. And maybe that's why, when you sit there at night, fan humming, lights low, thinking about that blank patch of sonar and the unmarked ships, you feel both terrified and oddly comforted. Because there are still places in this world where mystery wins, where the unknown isn't a problem to solve, but a reminder that we are, and always will be, guests on this planet. By now, you've been living with this thing in your head for so long that you can't help but talk about it. Friends, co-workers, even the poor barista who just wanted to know your name for the cup. Everyone's heard your half-joking, half-serious Malibu base pitch. And the reactions are always the same. A raised eyebrow, a skeptical laugh, someone muttering something about too much late-night YouTube. You don't blame them. To most people, this is just another California oddity, like kombucha bars or paparazzi fistfights. But for you, and for the strange little community that's grown around this mystery, it's something deeper, something that hums at the edge of your thoughts. So you find your people, the believers, the skeptics, the restless souls who spend their nights combing through sonar data and tide charts like they're deciphering a holy text. There's Dan, the former Navy tech, who swears the government is sitting on a gold mine of data about the site. And Amelia, a marine biologist, who doesn't believe in aliens, but can't explain the strange electromagnetic fluctuations recorded near the arches. And then there were the locals, the ones who grew up surfing those waters and claimed to have seen lights under the waves, dancing like silent fireworks before vanishing into the black. You all gather online, in forums and chat rooms, with names like Blue Abyss Theory and Under the Shelf. It's half science club, half support group, a mix of grainy screenshots, amateur theories, and the occasional blurry video clip that sends everyone spiraling into excited speculation. And yet, even in this crowd, you can feel the tension between wonder and skepticism. Because here's the truth, the kind of stories that might not be the literary size at all labels. And historians still argue whether we humans have a tendency to invent meaning when faced with chaos, to turn random shapes into patterns because our brains crave order. Maybe that's what you're all doing, seeing design where there's only chance. But then, someone digs up a new sonar, scan, a new set of coordinates, and the cycle begins again. And then there are the nights when you can't sleep, when you find yourself staring at the ceiling and wondering why you can't just let it go. Maybe it's because there's something addictive about a mystery this big, something that feeds that part of you that still wants to believe the world isn't fully mapped. Or maybe it's that eerie pull, the quiet voice that whispers, Come look closer. One quirky tidbit that always comes up in those late-night chats is the story of the surfboard encounter. A guy named Trevor claims that one evening, just before sunset, he paddled out past the usual break, trying to clear his head after a rough week. As the water grew calm, he noticed what looked like a faint glow beneath him. Soft, bluish light, pulsing gently like the slow beat of a heart. He stayed there for almost an hour, hypnotized, until the light faded away. Now, he's the first to admit it could have been bioluminescent algae or a trick of the setting sun, but the way his voice drops when he tells the story makes you think he doesn't really believe that. You start to realize the Malibu shelf isn't just a physical place anymore. It's a shared space in your collective imagination, a place where believers and skeptics meet, argue, joke, and, deep down, all quietly admit they want the same thing. And yet, that answer never comes. Expeditions are planned, then mysteriously cancelled. Promised funding evaporates. Equipment malfunctions. Cameras fail. It's almost comical at this point, like the ocean itself has developed a sense of humor, toying with anyone who tries to peel back its secrets. So you cope the only way you know how. With jokes mostly. Someone on the forum starts a running gag that the Malibu base is just a giant underwater In-N-Out, serving secret menu burgers to passing UFOs. Another swears it's the world's most expensive wine cellar, stocked by some eccentric billionaire. And you laugh, because what else can you do? It's either that or spiral into the quiet frustration of knowing you're chasing something you may never catch. But even through the humor, the sleepless nights persist. You lie awake, replaying the sonar scans in your mind. Those perfectly spaced arches, that impossibly flat roof. You picture yourself diving down, flashlight cutting through the darkness, hands brushing across stone that feels too warm, too alive. And in that imagined moment, you understand why none of you can let it go. Because maybe this isn't really about aliens, or ancient cities, or secret tunnels. Maybe it's about the thrill of standing on the edge of the unknown, staring into the deep, and feeling that quiet awe settle in your bones. Maybe it's about hope, that somewhere out there, hidden under 2,000 feet of Pacific silence, is proof that we don't know everything, that the world still has surprises left for us. Historians still argue whether mysteries like this are healthy for us, whether chasing the unknown is a sign of curiosity or just a refusal to accept reality. But sitting here, fan humming, room dim, you decide you don't care. Because even if it's just a geological quirk, even if the Malibu shelf is nothing more than stone and silt shaped by the tides, it's still beautiful. It's still yours to wonder about. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's okay to live with the questions, to lean into the quiet pull of something bigger than you, something that refuses to be solved. Because sometimes not knowing is the point. And now, after all the theories, the sleepless nights, and the whispered jokes about UFO burger joints, you find yourself back at the shoreline. The sun is dipping low, streaking Malibu in ribbons of orange and pink, and the ocean stretches out in front of you, calm and endless. You close your eyes and try to picture what lies beneath those gentle waves. The arches, the dark corridors, the silence that waits like a held breath. And you realize something. Maybe you'll never know. That thought should frustrate you. Maybe a younger version of you would have fought it, demanding answers, convinced that every mystery has to be solved if you just dig hard enough. But now there's a strange comfort in the not knowing. Because what would you really do with the truth anyway? Would it make your life better, safer, or happier? Or would it just shift the mystery somewhere else, deeper and farther away? The historians still argue whether humans are wired for closure or for curiosity, whether our need to explain is stronger than our willingness to simply wonder. But here, standing barefoot in the sand, you start to suspect that the wonder matters more. The Malibu shelf hums quietly in the back of your mind, not as a question anymore, but as a companion, something vast and unknowable that you get to share space with. It's the same quiet awe that sailors must have felt centuries ago, staring up at unfamiliar stars and realizing how small they were. It's humbling, sure, but in a way that feels strangely good, like you've been let in on a secret about the universe, that it doesn't need you to understand it to be magnificent. One quirky tidbit floats up in your memory. A fisherman who used to joke that whatever's down there is probably laughing at us, watching our little boats from the dark. Maybe he's right. Maybe the deep keeps its own counsel, and maybe that's the point. You imagine it now, the shelf below, quiet and unbothered, arches draped in shadows, currents whispering through the stone, like the slow exhale of something alive. The ocean above is busy with surfers, swimmers, and yachts. But down there it's just time and pressure, an eternal stillness that doesn't need an audience. And you realize you've stopped trying to solve it, not because you've given up, but because you've made peace with the idea that some things don't want to be solved. They want to be felt. To exist as questions that keep you humble, that keep you looking out toward the horizon with a sense of awe instead of ownership. Even the skeptics you've sparred with over the years, they feel it too, even if they don't admit it. The pull, the sense that something's out there, bigger than us, and that maybe the not knowing is what keeps the world feeling alive. You think back to the nights you spent staring at sonar scans, the mornings when you scrolled through message boards instead of sleeping, the endless debates with strangers who felt like friends. And you smile because you understand now. It was never really about finding proof. It was about the journey, the shared curiosity, the quiet thrill of chasing a mystery that doesn't want to be caught. And maybe that's what keeps you coming back here, to the edge of the Pacific, where the land falls away and the blue begins. Not for answers, but for the simple joy of standing on the boundary between what you know and what you don't. The waves kiss your ankles, cool and rhythmic, and for a moment, the whole thing feels almost sacred. The lights from the cliffs behind you flicker on one by one, and the hum of traffic on the Pacific Coast Highway fades into the distance. Out there, somewhere past the point where the light can reach, the arches wait, silent, patient, eternal. And in that quiet, you finally exhale. The room is dim now, the soft hum of the fans steady, almost like waves breaking against the shore. Your shoulders loosen as you let the last of the tension go, as if setting down a story you've been carrying too long. The Malibu shelf is still out there, a quiet secret resting under 2,000 feet of Pacific water, and for tonight, that's enough. You let the image fade slowly, the arches swallowed in blue, the currents drifting lazily through stone corridors, the steady hush of the deep. Nothing urgent, nothing waiting to be solved, just an ancient, indifferent peace that feels older than language. It's strange, isn't it, how something so far away, so untouchable, can feel so close. Like it's been sitting just behind your ribs this whole time, patient and calm. Outside, the world keeps moving. Traffic on the highway, phones buzzing with notifications, someone across town yelling at a TV. But here, now, it's just you and that vast, eternal quiet. You realize, with a soft sort of certainty, that you don't need answers to feel the wonder. that maybe the beauty of mysteries like this isn't in solving them, but in letting them be what they are. Reminders that the world still holds places we don't fully understand. So you stay there in the calm, letting your breath slow, your thoughts settle like silt at the bottom of a tide pool. And as the last of the imagined waves roll in, you hear it again, that low, distant hum that may be nothing at all, or may be everything.